abandoned ship. It's Kitakami. The single most infamous ship in World of Warships history. I'm not going to stat dump on you this time as I usually do in these sorts of videos, because there's really not another ship quite like this one, so I don't have any statistics to compare side by side or anything like that. Instead, I'm going to give a brief history lesson. This was originally in the game in Alpha as a premium Tier 8 cruiser. That very well may have been the first premium ship in the game. I don't remember that for sure, but having been at it in Alpha, it's certainly a contender. There's only one problem. It was removed entirely from the game. Now, most people, when they talk about removed ships, what they usually mean is removed from sale. So ships, free XP ships like Missouri and Smoland, or other kinds of ships that were added to the armory, Thunderer. These are ships that you can no longer obtain outside of Santa crates. There's also some ships that you can't even get in Santa crates, like Almirante Abro, I don't think is available. Vampire, the Tier 3 Vampire, is not available usually. But if you own these ships, you can still play them. This ship, however, was completely excised from the game for many, many years. And owners of the Kitakami at that time were compensated instead with the Tier 8 Japanese cruiser Atago, which is honestly probably an upgrade in many ways. I mean, that's about as good of a ship as it gets, tier for tier. So if it had to be a premium Japanese cruiser, there's no better choice. But why was this ship removed? I mean, that's awfully controversial, isn't it? Well, it's because of these 40 torpedo tubes. There are 10 quad launchers, 5 on each side. That's 20 torpedoes on each side. That is obviously untenable for balancing reasons. You might ask yourself, why did Wargaming even bother putting a ship like this in the game? Well, the reason is it is a historical ship. This ship actually existed, it's a real ship, and it had a very, interesting service. It was commanded at one point by the Yamamoto Isoroku, so it certainly earned its spot in history there. And even though the ship was laid down in 1919, it was reconfigured in 1941, around, that's getting into high tier ships in this game now, late World War II, mid to late. It was given these torpedo launchers, and it was turned into a torpedo boat. So that's how they took an old cruiser and made it useful during World War II. And so Wargaming thought, yeah, that's a cute idea. Let's add that to the game. Before changing their minds because it was an absolutely devastating idea. So why do I have it in my port right now? Well, I'm sure you all already know that this ship got re-added to the game. That's not really a secret to anybody. But I want to highlight the 2 conditions that made Kitakami's return possible. Because some players may not have been playing for long enough to know how different things were back then. I mean, this game is like 10 years old now. So, number 1, friendly fire was removed. I don't remember when it was removed, how many years ago that was now, but once upon a time, when you hit a friendly ship, it would hurt. Friendly fire used to be enabled. So you can imagine how irresponsible people were with 40 torpedo tubes that could potentially hit their allies. That must not have been a very fun time. Now, granted, if you did too much friendly fire, you would be marked, and you'd be on probation. Your username would turn pink and all that. But still, I mean, that's not really any consolation because it's just not fun for anyone. Somebody gets absolutely dumped on, and it can be an accident too. In fact, it was probably usually an accident. I mean, how could you not have accidents with this thing? So at some point, though, they made the decision to disable friendly fire, which made this a lot less egregious. But the other thing that made this possible was the introduction of submarines, or specifically a feature that Wargaming added for the introduction of submarines. They added this concept, this mechanic of torpedo loaders. Is it going to mention it in this tab here? It is not going to mention it. It may be implemented differently on this particular ship. I'm not actually 100% sure about that. But I'm sure some of the code is shared on the back end. Basically, for submarines, they wanted this mechanic where, you know, it's got all these torpedo tubes, but not all of them are reloading at the exact same time the way most surface ship torpedoes do. You know, those are... Or really any armament, right? Guns, torpedoes, you name it. They have one big-ass reload cooldown, and then you get them all back. Well, that's really difficult to balance, obviously, for Kitakami, because how long should the reload be when you get 40 torpedoes? You know? Well, I'll tell you, now it takes about 7 minutes, which means you get 2 full torp dumps over the course of a 20-minute match. And if you don't get anything in between, and it also has to be spec'd for that. You know, this is a lowly hull with very weak main battery at a high tier because of the power of these torpedoes. So a ship that can really only play twice in a battle is rough. So it was very difficult to balance, but when they added submarines and they added this concept of torpedo loaders, they immediately applied it to Kitakami, and now we have a much more interesting play style on our hands, because now Kitakami will only load 2 torpedo racks at a time, 1 per side. So first of all, you have to do a lot of weaving, you know, left and right to take full advantage of the torpedoes you're getting on both sides. But also, it really just means that you're like any other torpedo boat. You get, you know, reasonably fast reloading torpedoes. In this case, you can get it down to 62 seconds, and that's not counting adrenaline rush kicking in. I think base is 80 some odd seconds. So that's pretty normal. That's nominal. That's like most torpedo boats in the game. But the one advantage that Kitakami has is that if you don't use your torpedoes, then you can save them up. You're basically storing extra charges, if you will. So if you go 7 minutes without using any torpedoes, then you have an entire 40 of them at your disposal. But the moment you start using them, you know, only 1 rack per side is going to be reloading, and then only once that's done, the next begin to reload. But that feature enabled them to play around a little bit more with Kitakami. And they had been advertising the changes that they were testing over the course of, you know, probably over a year, maybe a couple years. They tried giving the main battery sap shells, and then they undid that. Now they only have HE shells, which is interesting. There's not even AP on this ship. You only get HE shells, and they don't do an impressive amount of damage by any means. They're 140 millimeter, but they have a nice reload time of 3 seconds, and they have an 11% fire chance. So I don't know if that's outstanding per se, but that's good. You know, you can set fires in this thing if you had to, and you get what I like to call self-defense guns against other destroyers and things. But obviously it's all about the torpedoes, and they kept iterating on this until finally they re-added Kitakami to the game last year, December. It was part of the Salvage for Victory event. Actually, it was the keynote, if you will, of the Salvage for Victory event. You could dump all kinds of resources, Research Bureau points, steel, coal, you could some amount of premium account time also. And it cost an inordinate amount of resources. But if you were willing to invest all of that, then you would get the legendary Kitakami, which will not be on sale again for at least 2 years, according to Wargaming. But there was one other way you could obtain this ship. The November prior, and maybe October, I don't remember exactly when, that fall, late fall, early winter, they announced a crowdfunding campaign for the book Naval Legends Cruisers, illustrative historical book that they want to put out there. And if you backed that book at the highest tier, the Grand Admiral tier, you got a mystery tier 10 Japanese cruiser. I don't think it was advertised as Japanese, just a mystery tier 10 cruiser, which everyone immediately saw right through that. That's clearly Kitakami. There were only 50 copies available at that tier. It costs like $450 and I got one because I wanted this. I wanted this so bad. So the books have not been shipped yet, but everybody who backed one were emailed their codes earlier this week to make up for delays in shipping. So anyone who backed their book should be getting their ships now, and that includes me getting the Kitakami, which I'm very excited about. But notice that, even though it was introduced as a tier 8 in the first place, it is now a tier 10. That's another change they made. They decided that that was the only way to make this ship even a little bit fair or reasonable. The interesting thing about that, though, is it is a tier 4 hull. That's right. I said this was laid down in 1919. It is a Kuma class cruiser, which is the tier 4 cruiser in the Japanese tech tree. These are the same class. And not much has changed. I mean, Wargaming did not make really any artificial changes to the hull or the armor scheme to help Kitakami's survivability. That's the point. That's part of its balance, is that it is made of explodium with a basically unprotected citadel. In fact, it's even worse than the tier 4 Kuma. I mean, look at this. The middle of the ship is just one entire citadel, but for whatever little it's worth, you have 10 extra millimeters on top on the smokestacks here. You don't even get those on Kitakami. Well, you kind of do, but they're thinner. And there's more gaps introduced now. They did add this auxiliary room armor, 16 millimeters there on the sides. But for all intents and purposes, you have a massive citadel extending from the deck, wrapping all the way around the middle of this ship. Another thing that kind of made me giggle is that the top of the observation area here is armored on Kitakami, 13 millimeters, versus Kuma, where it's all tarp. I found that amusing. But either way, this thing also doesn't have any guns on the back. All 4 guns are located in the front here, nothing behind. So, that's going to come up later in one of the replays. So there's a prevailing perception that this ship is bad, or at least mediocre. I mean, the thing is torpedo boats are difficult in the first place. None of them are particularly meta. I know that Legendary Mod Kleber is big in clan battles right now, not so much because of the torps, but because of the ultra high speeds. in combination with some torping ability. But in general, I mean, torpedo boats are a staple in this game. They're fun. They have their fans, but they tend to rank poorly in people's minds in terms of game impact. And obviously Kitakami would be just the king, the worst of them all in that regard. I remember a lot of people saying during the Salvage for Victory event, don't even worry about getting to Kitakami. It's not worth it. It is worth way too many resources to justify it. Just stop at Defense, the prior British cruiser that you could grind for on the way to getting Kitakami. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think this ship is actually bad. In fact, I've been kind of impressed at how Wargaming's fine-tuning of this thing makes it kind of viable. I guess I'll review the equipment really quickly. I have all of these special upgrades applied. I find every one of them very useful and important. And then recommendeds over here. Definitely got to take the torpedo tubes mod and minimize that reload time. But you get an exhaust smoke generator, kind of like some Italian ships have. And this is your get out of jail free card. I mean, when you're in trouble, you get to use this to disengage as long as there's not a radar or a nearby hydro, of course. And you also get an engine boost on top of a good base speed of 36 knots. So with that applied, you're topping out pretty good. And you also get a heal, which appears very meager. You're going to see in the replays that without signals, it heals back about 4,600 hit points per charge, and you get 4 of them. Am I running Superintendent? Yeah, even with Superintendent, you only get 4 of them. And you wouldn't think that to be very helpful, but when your health pool is only 33,000 to begin with, that helps actually. That helps a fair bit. So these are your tools to evade certain doom. And then, although you're missing a main battery armament, you only have HE, no choice there. You do have your choice of torpedoes, and I'll talk more about that in one of the replays, but yeah, you can use standard torpedoes that are wicked fast, and you can use deep water torpedoes, super deep waters, that can only hit capital ships, but they can go up to 20 kilometers, so the ship definitely has all the potential to score some errant hits way off in the distance. And even though the ship is maybe a mediocre deal, I do not regret backing that cruiser book for, $450 it was, because I'm still getting the book and I'm getting all the goodies. But I also got this ship, and I was surprised at what a fun time I'm able to have with it, which I'm going to show off soon. I'll mention that if you got a different tier of the cruiser book, the Naval Legends Cruisers crowdfunded, they gave you 2 codes. They gave you a code for World of Warships PC and a different code for World of Warships Legends. If you do not play World of Warships Legends, I highly encourage folks that backed any tier of that book to reach out to players from the World of Warships Legends community and ask them if they'd be willing to swap. I bought the Kitakami tier, but they structured it kind of weird. When you got the highest tier, you did not get the rewards of the second highest tier rolled into it. So the second highest tier, the Admiral tier, would give you the Puerto Rico. And I did not get that, but I did find somebody who got the Admiral tier and only plays World of Warships Legends. So I was able to give them Belfast in Legends with my code, and they were able to give me their code for Puerto Rico. So, and between the 4 tiers, there's a lot of good trades that can happen there. So that's something to keep in mind, is that folks who got the Kitakami and folks who got the Puerto Rico, you may be very interested in striking a deal with somebody. That's enough history, that's enough background. It's time to get into the gameplay. Now, if you were wondering what the worst case scenario looks like in this ship, it might not be what you think. Out of all of the flaws with this ship that could potentially be snags, you would think that the Citadel would be a pretty big one. But surprisingly, I didn't actually have that many situations where, I got dev struck like you would expect out of a Jinan or similar ships. I actually found the Kitakami experience to be a lot more comparable to Smolensk, which is really shocking. But I guess it makes sense. It kind of has troll armor. I'm not sure that it has troll armor for the same reason, though. It's just that it is so incredibly thin that everything is very liable to overpenetrate. And even though the Citadel is extremely exposed, this is a very small ship, and hitting that Citadel in specific is not so easy. The real problem, though, is that this exhaust smoke generator really does not last all that long. Now, to be super clear, this is all my fault. I mean, I totally misplayed this, and I knew it while I was doing it. I should have already been reversing, 20 seconds ago when I popped that smoke, but I got detected a moment ago, and I know I'm going to get detected again here, and it's by the Holland. I see the Holland right in front of me, and I think, okay, he's only 4 kilometers away from me, so this is pretty bad. So I try to fight back a little bit. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to duel that thing, and I don't even have any guns that can reach around to the back, so I'm kind of just running with my tail between my legs. But I'm impressed at Kitakami's survivability in a situation like this. I mean, my main goal right now is just to run as far away as I can, as fast as I can. And I'm taking a lot of damage here, but all I really need to do is live. I need to make sure I live. And Holland goes around that island, but even if he didn't, I was going away decently quick, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna make it. And then I get detected again. And I also crash into an island, which, again, all my fault. I'm an idiot. But this time I don't even know what's detecting me. And this time I have no recourse. Even if I hadn't run into an island, I probably would not have survived another salvo anyway. And that was an extremely short and embarrassing match for me. Now, I think this is what a lot of people picture when they think of Kitakami. They imagine rare battles with, you're popping off, you're getting a million torpedo hits, but most of the time you're going to be experiencing this. I actually did not experience this a majority of the time. This was more of an outlier. This one was probably the worst match I played, in fact. But I was glad I got to save the replay on this one, because it would be very boring for me to show a montage of getting dev struck halfway across the map. But that's not really what this ship is about. What you just witnessed is way more liable to happen, because even though this cruiser has a at best 7.9 kilometer detect, which is extremely good, that's highly competitive, that's better than every other cruiser in the game, and a lot of destroyers as well. But it is not better than most destroyers, and it is not better than any submarine. So, and that's exactly what happened, is I got spotted unexpectedly a second time, and it was by the enemy submarine, the Baleo. And at that point, there is no recourse at all. So you have to be very careful, and that's why they give you the exhaust smoke generator. They give you that get out of jail free card. You can use that to disengage whenever you're spotted suddenly. That's what it's for, of course, but the cooldown is not completely unforgiving, but I mean, there is a cooldown. You only get one get out of jail free card every so many seconds, and it doesn't last all that long on its own. Now, I think I was not running the smoke generator modification this match. I put it on after, and with that, it actually runs for a very decent amount of time. I mean, I can't recommend that upgrade enough on Kitakami. I think it actually makes a significant difference. It might have even allowed me to survive that situation. While I still would have gotten detected, maybe I would have been further away by that time, and I would have had to tank less damage. But with stock, it can be painful. It goes without saying that this ship has a lot of potential. So let's take a look at what it looks like when it reaches that potential. To start off, I'm just going to push forward towards the center with my friendly Hayate, which is a little awkward. I mean, I'm thinking in my head what I'm going to do when we really get into it, and I don't really have a good answer for that yet. I mean, obviously the best case scenario is they give B to us uncontested, but I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting a contest, and this ship is not exactly a good brawler, or a good cap contester, or a good anything really, except for farming large amounts of torpedo damage. It just happens to be extremely good at that. Now I can throw some torpedoes into the cap to make things a little treacherous for any enemy BBs, but what I actually end up doing is I perch up behind this island here so that I can give a little bit of supporting fire to my Hayate in case a destroyer shows up along this side of the B cap. Now, there's very little help I can actually add this way. These guns are nothing special, but something is better than nothing. But I really just need to focus on protecting myself. The longer Kitakami survives in a match, the better off. That kind of goes true for just about every ship. I guess you could argue, though, that, you know, some ships like German battleships and other brawlers benefit from just getting in there and forcing fights. And even if they die early, they go out having done a lot of damage and making an impact. This is definitely not one of those ships. So I kind of hide around the island, but as soon as I realize that B is uncontested, then I move on ahead. This is a pretty good map for Kitakami because it's all open water, but whoops, we're detected now. What's going on? You know, even though I have 7.9 kilometer detect, which is great for a cruiser, that still means that I'm going to be detected by unknown ships a lot of the time. But luckily, the friendly Khabarovsk spots that enemy Harugumo. That's what had me spotted, forces it to smoke up. Unfortunately, not until I've already wasted one of my smokes as well. But the good thing is that Harugumo is stuck there. I mean, he was flat broadside and he is bow against that rock there. So I send out these torpedoes knowing that that was going to happen. Or at least being sure that it could happen and that it would probably happen. So having taken care of that, now this entire chunk of the map is ostensibly mine. And that is extremely powerful because look at what we have in front of us. 3 battleships that are just kind of piddling around. There's also a Goliath over there, which is great, you know, heavy cruiser. That's also a valuable target. But now is probably a good time to talk more about the different torpedo types. Ignoring the fact that I'm spotted for a moment, I'm sure that's the Baleo in the cap circle, but luckily that's only for a minute and nobody notices. So Kitakami has 2 torpedo types that you can switch between freely. It has the standard torpedo, which is 12 kilometer range, 95 knots. That is insane for a torpedo. And it does, 13,000 damage each, which is good. It's nothing overwhelming, but it's very good. But you also get these deep water torpedoes, which can only hit capital ships, but they can go 20 kilometers, which comes in extremely handy at moments like that. We have 3 battleships just chilling back there. And notice how, without even trying, I was able to dump, what was that, 5 racks of torpedoes? I just had those, you know, over the course of 5 minutes of battle. I was able to reload those that quickly. Even though you can only reload 2 racks at a time, 1 on each side, and that happens at best every 62 seconds, barring adrenaline rush, of course. That sounds like you're going to get impatient on paper, or I guess I should say, sounds like it rewards patience on paper, a lot of patience, but I didn't feel that impatient here. I used 2 racks of torpedoes against the Harugumo, and that was it. You know, and I didn't have any other targets. I didn't have to do any area denial. I wasn't going to waste any torps on the Baleo, of course. So I had all of those racks free to just throw some deep waters out towards those battleships. And those did, what, 24,000 damage each maximum. Very good. And they also have an okay speed, a respectable speed of 74 knots. So extremely powerful. I'm spotted once again, and I have my smoke available and I don't use it. That was definitely a gamble. But as you can see, I did not die, and that's all that really matters. Health is a resource, right? There was definitely a risk that I could have gotten dev-struck there, but in my experience, this has very troll armor. You know, it can survive a salvo or two. I don't find it to be made of explodium quite the same way that Minotaur or Jinan are, or similar ships. But I do pop my smoke here to make sure that I can cross this channel safely and not get spotted by the Montana, and also to make sure that the Baleo doesn't spot me while that Izumo has a shot on me. So I get just behind cover at just the right time, and I'm chasing Baleo away. I'm sure he wants to go over there anyway to fight our Montana, but now I have the cap circle all to myself for a hot minute, and I've got plenty of torpedoes for anybody that wants to come around any of these rocks. I mean, I'm, you know, destroyer gaming over here. Those tend to be some of my favorite ships in this game. Ships that kind of break class norms or type norms. You know, like the Karl Johan that everyone's been hyped about this week thanks to the trade-in. That's kind of like a torpedo battleship. What a concept, right? And this, of course, is a torpedo boat in the cruiser slot, and it's extremely good at it. But that's okay. In the meantime, we're just throwing torpedoes everywhere, and it's getting hits. Just gotta remember to put on the standard not deep water torpedoes for Goliath, for example. Some deep water torpedoes in this game can hit cruisers, namely the Pan-Asian deep water torpedoes. Those almost always can hit cruisers. I think there's one exception. But these deep water torpedoes cannot. Only capital ships in this case. I really want to hunt down this Montana, and I am within detectability range here, so I pop my smoke just to make sure. And he's running around that island, so I realize that I'm not going to get as far with that as I wanted. But the other thing is that while I'm smoked up, I can be shooting at this Montana here. Now, that's a good rule of thumb. I mean, you have guns, there's no reason not to use them. But it's really easy to understate the potential of these Kitakami guns. I mean, they are nothing special, but they can start fires. You know, and if you can, you should, right? But also, I mean, they're more than just fire starters. I find that there are plenty of guns in this game that are more useless than Kitakamis. I've actually had pretty good success dueling destroyers with these guns. Now, not in a fair fight, mind you. In a fair fight, Kitakami is in a very in a very rough spot. But this thing has such a short firing range, 11.2 kilometers, that you're not really risking a whole lot to open fire when the opportunity presents itself. I mean, don't do it frivolously. But we're going to see an example right now. I'm actually still waiting on this Montana here. I'm not even worried about what's spotting me until I get that third torpedo rack off, because I want to make sure I secure that kill. But there's a low health Udaloy over there, and the only thing shooting at it is a Wisconsin way in the distance. He could use my help. So we're going to help. We're going to use those guns, going to put them to use, and you know what? It gets the job done. Luckily, I did have my smoke up there. But notice how, you know, everything's happening. I'm able to secure the double strike as well, which I'm very happy about. Able to get off another rack of torpedoes for that Izumo in the distance. And I still have plenty of consumable uptime, and I have plenty of health, too. I mean, I've taken a fair bit of damage this match, and again, you would expect Kitakami to be made of explodium, but I'm sitting pretty at half health right now. And basically just fending off all attackers from the A cap practically by myself at this point. Of course, the Montana was there for a while and helped, and then Wisconsin helped as well, but, you know, very, very fun time there. And those torpedoes that I threw out kind of casually like it was nothing, gonna score a hit on those. Now it's just me and the Baleo. I want this kill so bad. 195,000 damage. Can we get to 200,000? This thing is... I don't know. It's not exactly a good sub-hunter because it cannot tolerate being spotted, and obviously challenging a sub and eating a salvo of homing torpedoes is not anyone's idea of a good time. This thing is pretty maneuverable, though. I have no trouble dodging the next wave of torpedoes that appear right here, even though I get pinged, but I also clear that quickly and, you know, whatever. Unfortunately, we win, you know, what a shame, and we're not able to kill the Baleo, so 195,000. I didn't get to show it off, but this thing actually has pretty good depth charges. I don't know if the damage is you know, anything special, but it sends off 10 depth charges behind, like you would expect out of a destroyer. So had I had a couple more seconds, I would have gotten that kill as well. Probably broken the 200,000 damage barrier. But yeah, only 13 hits with the main guns, and only 12 torpedo hits also. I mean, that's the part that's most astounding to me. But in so few armaments, we were able to set 2 fires, cause 9 floods, gotta love it, and destroy 3 ships, including a double strike. I got a chuckle out of that one for sure. And of course, at the top of the leaderboard, 57,000 damage to the Montana and 86,000 damage to the other Montana. Oh my. And basically all the health of Harugumo, almost. I'm sure Khabarovsk did a number on him, but 18, almost 19,000 as well. Easy, yeah, I mean, it adds up. It adds up extremely quickly. You know, the funny thing about this ship is it's basically just a torpedo boat. I honestly find it quite similar to Jaeger, having not played enough torpedo boats in my time. But the thing is ships like Shimakaze, they have a lot of torps that they can launch all at once, but the reload between them is extremely long, and the only way to cheat that is if you have a torpedo reload booster. I don't remember if Shimakaze does. I know Yugumo and Kagero do, similar ships, but this ship is different. This ship has actually pretty good torpedo uptime, and it has basically torpedo storage as well. You know, torpedoes you don't use, you get to build those up, and as you saw with that pack of battleships, you know, you can just unload them when the time is right. make an undodgeable wall. 20-kilometer deep waters is pretty crazy. You can launch that cross map, and the shorter standard torpedoes are still amazing. 12 kilometers. That's broadly useful. That's outside of every radar range except for Russian, and they go wicked fast. So this ship is I was pleasantly surprised. I expected this to be a meme, and I genuinely expected Wargaming to intentionally kneecap this ship so that no one would complain. So I was pleasantly surprised to find that they actually made an honest attempt at really balancing this thing. I mean, this is obviously one of the good games, and you don't always have a good game. I would say it is pretty balanced. I had to manage my resources carefully and my positioning going between islands and things like that. I also did take some gunfire, but you know what? I'm glad that not every salvo is a guaranteed dev strike either. It can certainly happen, but it's not guaranteed to happen, and I like it. I've been blown away by this ship. My final verdict is that this ship is not actually bad. I still decided to feature it in Abandoned Ship, however, because the ship itself is very infamous in the history of World of Warships, and also because I think there's just a wide perception that this ship is bad, or mediocre at best. But I wanted to show off that, Wargaming actually really cooked with this one. They really took their time. It's a torpedo boat, and that carries its own baggage. I'm not saying it's the greatest ship ever, but if boating is your thing, if that's what you enjoy, this is actually very viable, in my opinion, and it's a very good time. So... and that's okay too for this series. I'm happy to show off ships that people think are bad and offer a counter argument. And I was very happy and proud to have that opportunity to do so with Kitakami today. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope this was informative, and I'll see you next time.